Hi everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something kind of fascinating, and honestly, a little contradictory. We're unpacking the mechanics of deception versus the psychology of lying. Now, we aren't just skimming the surface of everyday untruths here. We're going to systematically break down the hidden architecture of a lie and the whole engine of human interaction that actually drives it. To do that, we have to toss out the moral judgments for a second and just treat deception as what it truly is, a highly evolved cognitive function.
So why is deception literally everywhere? Before we even look at the gears and levers of a lie, we have to acknowledge this unavoidable truth. Everybody does it. Seriously, across cultures, different age groups, all walks of life, it's everywhere. Research actually shows that kids start grasping the concept of deception when they're only 2 or 3 years old. It's a fundamental developmental milestone, right up there with learning to walk and talk. And as adults, well, studies suggest the average person tells 1 to 2 lies every single day. Think about that. It is an incredibly persistent trait that's deeply, deeply embedded in our human operating system. We're going to strip away the outer layers of judgment and just look at the core reality of this phenomenon to figure out exactly why it's there in the first place.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the mechanics of deception. To really get a grip on deception, we essentially need to treat the human brain like a machine. When we talk about the mechanics of deception, we're talking about the literal internal processes, the active real-time construction of a lie. Think of it like real-time engineering, because a lie doesn't just, spontaneously pop into existence. It has to be deliberately built. And it all starts with cognitive load. See, telling the truth is super easy, right? You're just recalling an event that actually happened. But lying, oh man, that requires a massive spike in brain power. You have to actively suppress the truth, completely fabricate an alternative reality, and then, here's the kicker, engage in memory manipulation. Meaning you have to perfectly remember this fake reality so your future stories line up with it. Your brain is juggling 2 totally different versions of reality at the exact same time, constantly deciding which one to output depending on who you're talking to. Those are the heavy gears grinding in the background. It's this incredibly sophisticated, high-energy mechanical process happening entirely within the invisible space of our own minds.
Okay, moving on to part 2, why we tell lies.
So if we all possess the mechanics, that high-level cognitive capability to build a deception, what actually triggers us to use it? Well, it all boils down to intent. There are basically 4 primary pillars of motivation driving the machinery of a lie. The first one is avoiding punishment. Think of a toddler denying they broke a vase, or maybe an employee trying to cover up a totally blown deadline. It's a pure survival reflex. The second pillar is securing a reward. This is when someone inflates their resume to snag a job or exaggerates a wild story just to gain some social status. The third one, protecting someone else's feelings. This is your classic altruistic white lie. Telling your friend their awful presentation was actually amazing because you value the relationship way more than the objective truth. And finally, the fourth pillar is the preservation of our own self-image. Sometimes we don't even lie to deceive other people, we lie to deceive ourselves. We maintain this internal narrative that we're somehow smarter, braver, or more successful than we actually are. This why is the fuel. Without at least one of these underlying motives, the whole complex machinery of deception just sits totally idle.
As you can see, a lie is inherently a 2-part phenomenon. On the one hand, you've got the cold, structural, cognitive assembly of a falsehood. Those are the mechanics we were just talking about. But that machinery, it is driven entirely by these messy, emotional, deeply human drivers, the psychology. You really can't understand one without the other. The mechanics are the how, the precise neurological engineering you need to suppress the truth. But the psychology represents the why. It's the fear, the desire, or even the empathy that triggered the process in the first place. When we separate them conceptually like this, it helps us realize that deception isn't just an engineered structure, it's an emotional symptom. The two exist in a constant, incredibly dynamic feedback loop.
Which brings us to part 3, the psychology behind the act. If we want to truly understand deception, we absolutely have to look at it through the lens of psychology. Because honestly, it is never just about the lie itself, it is always about the person telling it. The mechanics alone are just a tool. A hammer doesn't just hit a nail all by itself, right? A mind with a specific motive has to pick it up and swing it. By shifting our focus over to the psychological drivers, we completely transform how we see deception. It goes from being just a simple behavioral flaw to a profound window into human needs, human fears, and human desires. So when someone lies to us, the most revealing question isn't how did they trick me? Actually, it's what vulnerability were they trying to protect? Or what connection were they desperately trying to forge?
I
love this framing because ultimately the mechanics build the bridge, sure, but the psychology is the reason we actually choose to cross it. And when we finally grasp the psychology of lying, why people actually do it, it literally changes everything. It changes how we view every single interaction, every piece of information, and every narrative we encounter. We stop getting so bogged down in the purely analytical game of lie detection, and instead we start looking right past the surface of the untruth. We start peering directly into the human condition that made that lie necessary. The lie just becomes a map to a person's inner psychological landscape.
We've spent all this time analyzing the human mind as an objective machine, but let's turn the mirror around for a second. What are your own psychological mechanics? Think about it. When you find yourself constructing a narrative that isn't entirely true, even if it's just a tiny, polite social fiction, what gears are actually turning in your head? And more importantly, what psychological fuel is driving them? Understanding the mechanics of deception isn't just about spotting it in the people around us. It's really about confronting the complex and, yeah, sometimes totally uncomfortable truths about ourselves.